Saddam Hussein, born on 28 April 1937 in Al-Afza, Iraq, was one of the most controversial and enigmatic figures in modern Middle Eastern history. Rising from a humble background to become the president of Iraq, his legacy is marked by brutal authoritarian rule, significant geopolitical influence, and complex relationships with both regional and global powers. Hussein's time in power, which lasted from 1979 to 2003, was defined by ruthless tactics, an insatiable drive for power, and significant conflicts that shaped Iraq and the broader Middle East. This essay explores the rise and reign of Saddam Hussein, his domestic and foreign policies, and the lasting impact of his leadership on Iraq and the world. Early life and rise to power. Saddam Hussein was born into a poor family in the small village of Al-Afza near Tikrit, Iraq. His father abandoned the family before he was born, and his mother struggled to raise him. Saddam's early life was shaped by the instability and poverty that permeated Iraq during the 1940s and 1950s. His maternal uncle, Khayarullah Tulfa, a strong nationalist and Arab nationalist, had a significant influence on him, particularly in terms of political thought. It was through his uncle that Saddam was exposed to the ideas of Arab nationalism and socialism, which later became central to his political ideology. Hussein's political career began in the 1950s when he joined the Ba'ath Party, a political movement advocating for Arab unity, socialism, and secularism. The Ba'ath Party was founded in Syria in 1947 and had a presence in Iraq by the early 1960s. Saddam's initial involvement in politics was through the party's youth wing, and his early years were marked by activism and a commitment to the overthrow of the Iraqi monarchy. In 1959, Saddam participated in an assassination attempt on then Iraqi Prime Minister Abd al-Karim Qasim, which failed. This resulted in Saddam fleeing to Egypt, where he spent several years in exile before returning to Iraq in the 1960s. Saddam's return to Iraq coincided with the rise of the Ba'ath Party to power in 1968 after a coup ousted the government. While Saddam was not initially at the center of power, he quickly climbed the political ladder. He became vice president in 1968, and in 1979, after the resignation of President Ahmad Hassan al-Bakr, Saddam assumed the presidency of Iraq. By this time, Saddam had consolidated his power within the Ba'ath Party, and his authoritarian rule began in earnest. Consolidation of power and domestic policies. Saddam Hussein's rule was marked by an iron-fisted approach to governance. Once in power, he sought to eliminate all potential rivals and threats to his authority. A campaign of purges ensued, targeting both political opponents within the Ba'ath Party and members of the broader Iraqi society who could challenge his dominance. These purges were often brutal, with individuals being executed, tortured, or exiled. One of the key elements of Saddam's rule was the centralization of power. He positioned himself as the unquestioned leader of Iraq and sought to create a personality cult akin to that of other dictators in the region. His portrait was ubiquitous, and his speeches were presented as divine commands. He took on the title of the President of the Republic and cultivated a sense of nationalism and pride among Iraqis, often tying his leadership to the country's potential for greatness. Saddam's domestic policies included the development of a strong state apparatus, including a powerful secret police and military forces that would keep the population under strict control. The regime heavily monitored communications and suppressed any dissent, both politically and culturally. The creation of a surveillance state allowed Saddam to remain vigilant against any signs of opposition, often punishing perceived enemies harshly. Human rights abuses under Saddam's regime were widespread.